Right now, in today's video, I want to talk about exactly how I think gearing is going to work. Now, it's important that this is a theory. It's not final. Things could be different on release with Nighthaven, but this is an idea from extracts from the dev video we got yesterday, or not even yesterday, still less than a day ago, but we got an hour, 22-minute dev video of the brand new update, going over all of the different content and systems. And today we're focusing on the progression overhaul and how I think it's going to look from the sort of things they spoke about in the dev video. So you guys can sort of have an idea of how things are changing going into Nighthaven, and maybe it'd be a little less confusing. Because I know a lot of people, based off what they said, it was just words, right? There was no actual graphics on how the gear was changing, so it could be a little bit confusing. So I decided to whip up some high quality graphics to sort of give you an idea on how I think everything is going to look. So, to start off with, at a baseline, I'm quickly going to pull up some of my notes here. They are doing a massive overhaul to a lot of, like, smaller things. So, there's some quick notes I made from the dev stream, and I think we're going to go over this first. So, of course, to start off with, you are going to be getting, or we are going to be getting a stat crunch. Now, I don't know if these numbers are exactly correct that the developer in the video said, but he said we're going from 735 attributes down to 535 plus the food. So we are getting a huge stat cut, which I think, in my opinion, is a good thing, as we were getting a pretty significant power creep going on, especially with people running too much Constitution. The heavy metal was really starting to show. So I honestly am happy that we're going a little bit back in time to a more, I guess, less powerful meta in terms of stats. So less is going to be a focus on perks and gear now, rather than your attributes. Of course, attributes are now going to be tied straight up to your level, not to your gear. We will get onto that in my graph. So next up is Hardy. Hardy is a confirmed perk that is changing, either getting removed or swapped out for a new perk on your current gear. Presumably, it might be swapped out for something random, or a new perk, maybe even on your rings. And we don't know what that's going to be, but we know that Hardy is getting removed. But that is not to worry, especially for my light friends like me as a musket. They are going to be now making it a baseline change. So depending on your weight class and how much stamina you use to dodge, that's just going to be built in now, which means you don't need that perk, and that frees up a third perk on your ring, which is really nice quality of life change, meaning you can now just double dodge as a light without, needing Hardy. Same with, medium and so forth, and it's a really good change. Next up is refreshing. This was an extract from the dev blog we got a couple weeks ago, actually probably a few weeks ago now, where they said that refreshing was also going, and a lot of those sort of bland, required, mundane perks that didn't have conditionals to proc are also going to be changing. But we do not have a list or a post of any of those perks that are changing or getting removed, and we probably won't know until the day when we get the patch notes and New World Database area gets updated. So in terms of that, just leave that as a bit of speculation, but also just keep in mind that your current gear might be obsolete in the long run. Like, as we know, Umbrals are coming back, which we will get onto. Of course, you can upgrade with Umbral now. Umbrals are coming back. But just keep in mind your old gear might not have the perks you no longer or want anymore. So while you could upgrade it, is it worth it? That's something we'll have to analyze on the day. But jumping on from that, skill charms. Skill charms are the new sort of gearing system, which we will get onto a little bit more in depth here. I just had a theory on how skill charms were going to be made and what trade skills they would require. So I currently feel like, especially based on some of the info we got from the dev stream, that I had just this odd suspicion that the skill charms you want to make might need the actual skill or trade skill associated. For example, if I wanted to make a crippling powder and musket weapon charm, right, I need engineering. So that's just a theory. Trade skills are obviously going to be relevant. We know that making perk charms, which is a new gearing system we'll get onto, are going to require trade skills. So that is something to keep in mind, but we don't know what trade skills. This is purely a theory. Same with the offensive and defensive charms, which we will get into. They're basically splitting things up into new perk pools for the new gearing system. And again, that will require trade skills, and it will require a mix of trade skills like the matrices currently do. And then next up is Chromatic Seals. This is a relatively big change. Chromatic Seals no longer have a time gate, so you can buy as many as you want, and they also have got a price cut from 5,000 gold to 2,000 gold. Also, there's no raid lockout anymore, so presumably following the same pattern, you will be able to get as many Chromatic Seals as you want from a raid, provided you constantly farm it. That's a theory though. We definitely know that you can buy them infinitely from the faction vendor. So there's plausible evidence that you could also get as many as you want from completing a raid as well. So that is, in my opinion, pretty cool. That Chromatic Seals are now just going to be a generic resource that you can obtain fairly easily and much cheaper. They're also said to be used in the perk charm recipes, but that is a rumor. I don't want to make you invest yet. Hold your gold still. There is a lot of speculation in this video just based on basically ideas formulating from a dev video. So nothing is confirmed here. Next up is the Umbral upgrades. We know we're getting a wallet cap of 4,000 Umbral, and you're going to have a set amount of Umbral you can earn each week. This is what they at least mentioned in the dev stream. Things, again, could be subject to change. Alongside that, they mentioned that they could do, or you could do, with a weekly Umbral cap, 5 upgrades to 800 gear score from 735 gear score. Now, it's important to mention a couple things here. This is relatively low gear score. This is from 735. This means that if you got gear that was like 790 or 795 and you want to just quickly tick it over to 800 gear score, it's going to be a lot cheaper to do so. You're going to save Umbral, in turn meaning you might be able to upgrade more than 5 pieces to 800 a week. So there's this idea that depending on the gear score you get your new gear dropped at, then, you know, you could get more done. Now, that also comes back to the idea that you might have old gear that you want to upgrade from 725 that will be a little bit more costly, right? Especially artifacts are still going to be relevant. What artifacts are you going to choose to upgrade each week and use that Umbral and invest that Umbral with? That is your choice to make, and that is sort of leaning into the idea that there's multiple paths to progression. Jumping onto the gearing, the more rather significant portion of this video. Now, gearing is changing completely. Everything you know about gearing is pretty much going out the window. They're introducing a new system called charm slots. The shortest answer I can give you onto what a charm slot is it's a gem slot, but for perks. And what that means is you are going to be able to obtain new gear and old gear that will have basically a perk charm slot instead of a set perk. This allows you to have more customization and future-proofing with your builds in case there is a meta shift, as these act like gem slots and can be swapped out in the future. The main in-game, following you get your gear templates, as I like to call them, we will get onto that term in a second here with the graph below, is the crafted perk charms. As we mentioned in the little notes before, this is where crafting is going to heavily come into play in Season 10. Just like matrices are right now, craft mods will be the new sort of resource that a lot of crafters will be going for, selling to other players. You'll presumably be able to buy these. Now, these are example perks, so I'm just using Arcane Harnessing, Keen on the Silken Cocoon. These are examples. These could be set to change perks. These could be different perks in Season 10. They're just examples to formulate an idea from the information we got from the dev video. So I quickly want to clarify that. Take everything with a grain of salt. Even though I have a solid theory of how gearing is going to work, just keep that in mind. So jumping back onto it, you still have gem charm slots, and they're called gem charm slots now, or gem sockets still. And you can only have one of these per gear still, so there is a limit, a hard limit on these. And then there is the new infix perks. Infix perks we actually already have, and these are aka illegal perks that we currently have on gear. So think Silken Cocoon with Keen, Sandline Tarsus with Keen Speed. Those sort of perks are infix perks. They're illegal perk combinations that only unique pieces of named gear or certain gear will have that you might want to chase and put into your build and upgrade to 800 gear score with Umbral, because that has a unique perk that you can't find anywhere else. That is what an infix perk is. They said it was very akin to artifact perks, and going forward, I see this as how they will introduce artifacts in the future. Artifacts, while still being relevant, I don't think they're going to be introducing many new artifacts going forward, as this system is set to sort of replace that and make artifacts redundant in the sense that they can have much more freedom in the way it works, as you can just get an infix perk on any kind of gear. It's not limited to a specific type of weapon now. There also comes with a lot of artifact perk changes, which we don't know, we just have confirmation that some things are changing. For example, I'll give a quick reference. Lifetaker is now going to be dual scaling Dex and Int, which is a direct buff to Musket Lifetaker. So, I mean, I'm happy with that, but there is some little hints in there of what's changing, but we won't have, again, the full deets until Season 10 patch notes, until everything goes live. But that is just a quick sort of idea that I'm throwing around, that artifact perks, aka infix perks, are this idea that you can get unique gear with a set perk that has a unique purpose that might be useful to your build. Next up, below that, you can see these empty charm slots. This is where the new gearing system really comes into play with those perk charms I mentioned. I hope this graph really illustrates what I'm sort of talking about well, as I want to make it very approachable and player friendly, especially if you didn't want to trudge through the whole dev video or you left it off a little bit confused. I really want to nail down a very, hopefully, easy to understand system. Some things might still be a little bit confusing here, and hopefully release clarifies that. But if you want a little bit of insight, I hope this helps you there. So we have an infix gear piece here, which is the Silken Cocoon with Keen, a gem charm slot, and 2 empty sockets. You'll then be able to make a perk charm at a crafting station or crafting stations and slot that into the corresponding charm slot. Now, there is types of charm slots that is important to note. There is 4 different types of charm slots, which are offensive, weapon, gem, and defensive. Those are the 4 key charm slot types that you can get in any order. So you could get 2 offensive charms on 1 piece of gear, like so. Now, it's important to note that this is effectively a way to future-proof and allow more customization, as again, this is going to be able to be changed in down the line. Imagine Season 11, they do a meta shift. You'll simply be able to swap out the nerfed perk charm for a new perk charm in that gear's place, meaning you still get to keep your gear, but you now only have to swap out the perk charm. This gives a lot more freedom. It's more casual player friendly. It's more rewarding and it feels good to get good gear because you know it's long term. You have that security. If they increase the gear score, you now have Umbral there to up your gear score as well. So there's a lot more, I guess, security in what you're earning and what you're progressing, rather than every season there being a new meta and having to craft entirely new gear. I don't know if you guys played or if you're new or returning during Season 8 when they introduced the Sundering Stacks perk, which sort of became meta for a lot of DPS builds until they nerfed it shortly after. That perk at launch would cost millions to put on a new piece of gear, which is, in my opinion, not millions, hundreds of thousands of gold, right? Which I think is a bit of an appalling system. And then they literally nerfed Sundering Stacks a few weeks down the line, making that gear once again redundant for a lot of DPS builds. So this is the idea that instead of having to waste a lot of gold season to season, you now just have to waste a fraction of the gold to swap the perk charm. The value of perk charms, that's to be seen. That is something we will have to find out. Will these be expensive? Don't know. I have a feeling they're going to be sort of a moderate price range. Let's say a perk charm goes for 5,000 gold. I think that's respectable. Now, coming on to the next sort of idea here is your weapon charm slots, or rather the types of charm slots. So we know you can get offensive, weapon, gem, and defensive. These are obviously all, by the way, they are worded different categories for your perks. So offensive would mean it's a category of all of your your damage perks that you could slot into this charm slot. Same with weapon, that would be all of your weapon charms or weapon perks that you could slot into this charm slot. Same with defensive, that would be like your enchanter boards, your shirking heals, your shirking arcane, all of those sort of perks. That's what would go onto these perk charm slots and so forth, like gems into gems. Very, in my opinion, straightforward. There is a little bit more complexity to it in the sense that, again, you could only ever get 2 offensive charm slots on 1 piece of gear. So on the example of the finisher here, only 2 possible offensive charm slots. That's the max on offensive. Then you could only ever get 2 defensive. You can only ever get 1 weapon skill charm slot, and you can only ever get 1 infix as well, for example. And this would be capped out at the number of perks you're allowed on gear, which is rumored based on a screenshot provided I'm actually going to open up my Discord here because I'm banned from the New World Discord, so I can't see this stuff. So I'm really appreciative of my viewers being able to show me this. So Zim here had a screenshot that I think it was Annuin showed from the official New World Discord. This is what the actual gear is going to look like in game. This is actually pretty close to my concept that we're talking about on Photoshop that I mocked up. It has no color coding though, that's the only difference, there's no color coding. As you can see at the top here, you have an empty and a defensive charm slot. This is actually what it's going to look like, by the way. You can see the attributes are no longer here as well. And you can also see that it's 726, providing you can upgrade it with Umbral. Also, that armor set in the background, you can faintly see, is pretty cool. But nonetheless, you have the charm slots here, and you're going to be able to, again, simply take your perk charm, like so, and put it onto the slot. So obviously, this is a skill charm slot, so you can put Sweep or Deadly Flourish on there, and you can put any other kind of perk that wasn't a weapon perk. And same forth with Gem. This UI looks fantastic, by the way. Looks really clean, really user-friendly, and I think while things might seem complex to a few people now, once we get our hands on it, I think it's going to be probably the most straightforward gearing system we've ever had, but also yield the most dynamic and interesting builds we've ever had. So again, jumping back into it, you have the perk slots here. And with those perk slots, of course, you can slot your gear. So I hope that sort of makes sense. I feel like it was, you know, sort of the easiest way I could explain it. Now, jumping onto mutated and crafted and looted gear. So this is the next concept I made based on information we got from the dev video. The amount of empty perk charm slots you get depends on the gear you do. Now, this is where this term template comes in. I like to call these gear templates. This is going to be my nickname for them going into release as well. Maybe other people will pick up that as well. But it will have, Mutation level 3 will be the only content in the game that will drop 4 empty sockets or 4 empty charm slots, which is kind of insane. If you think about it, there's a blank slate for you to fully customize the gear in the way you want. Now, there is a caveat. You still have to get the ideal charm slots you want, but that's a lot less RNG than the perks entirely, which is kind of neat. So this amulet that I mocked up has 2 defensive, 1 offensive, and 1 gem. Gem being probably guaranteed, offensive being obviously capped at 2, and same with defensive capped at 2, in any order you would like to get this. Now, obviously, you can't get a skill charm slot on an amulet. Maybe you couldn't, if we actually don't know. That's kind of an assumption on my end that you can't get weapon perks on amulets, but this is sort of the mock-up I had anyways. This is Mutation level 3 only. You will only ever be able to get a full quad template from Mutation level 3. That's the only content that will yield this such gear. That doesn't mean other content is invalidated though. Looking to the right, I mocked up a crafted amulet. The only difference that you might notice is that we have a set perk here. I chose Refreshing Recovery, and this is the idea, or sorry, the confirmation from the dev video that you will only ever be able to get max 3 empty charms from other content. So from raids, Isle of the Night, Catacombs, the new procedural dungeons, or from crafting, more specifically they mentioned, will only ever get a max of 3 empty charm slots. Now, it's also important to mention, something I didn't notice is they actually have 4 perks here. So we actually are going up to 4 perks. That's something I didn't notice the first time around. So my concept in like the practicality of like the idea of the systems is here, but I didn't understand we're actually going to get another perk entirely. That's something new that we only got confirmation of through Annuin on the Discord, that there's actually 4 perks now. And that's kind of neat that we have that freedom now. Now, that's kind of leaving me to the assumption that there is going to be 4 charm slots plus the gem charm slot. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And again, you still have the set perk. Now, talking about the set perk here more specifically, this is RNG. This is still like the old system. You craft a piece of gear, for example, through a Gorgonite schematic, and you're going to get a set perk. But you can get also a chance at a triple empty charm slot, which allows you to have a lot more customization and depth. So this is still possible to roll best in slot, but it is, you know, I guess 25% more restricted than a mutated amulet with a quad roll. Now, I quickly want to mention this kind of quad roll here with quad empty sockets is going to be like ultra fucking rare. I would expect this kind of gear to be probably some of the hardest to get. Like, I wouldn't expect this to be easy. This is not going to be easy to get. You're going to be farming a lot of M3s. This is like the ideal situation for future proofing. So like, while you could get best in slot through crafting with a set perk on RNG, you don't have the future proofing for this perk. If refreshing recovery gets nerfed or changed or whatever, it might be bad, and this might make that piece of gear not as good as it used to be. Meanwhile, if I get a quad template, I can just swap out refreshing recovery if it comes bad, you know? So there's the idea that you have more future proofing with a quad slot. And I think that's neat. So there's going to be this ultimate in-game chase of getting a perfect template. And again, that doesn't mean that this content is invaluable, because it absolutely is. This is also not just crafting. Triple perk slot is also going to come from Isle of the Night and Catacombs, if I didn't say it already. It's also going to come from old named items, so think like infix gear and things like that. There's also going to be numerous other ways of getting, or avenues of getting this gear as well. Could be open world bosses, you get new named items with quad or triple gem slot, sorry. And that's sort of the speculation. We don't know all of these sources that you can get triple slot from. I'm assuming it's going to be, you know, Isle of the Night Raid, Catacombs, PvP track, things like that. Also, I didn't mention set bonuses on here. We will get onto artifacts soon. The main reason why I didn't mention set bonuses in here is I'm not quite sure how they factor into things. Are they just going to be an additional item that you get on the gear from the set content? For example, we know that one of the set bonuses is going to come from Isle of the Night. And with Isle of the Night, will it just be additional, like at the bottom is like a red text or grey text? Like, hey, you get the set bonus on this piece of gear that you farmed from Isle of the Night. There is potential for that, which would add a lot of value back into that Isle of the Night gear, right? Because you can't get set bonus gear from mutations. While you can get this really nice empty socket gear, you won't get the set bonuses. And there's this idea that you want to mix and match pieces from all these different avenues. Do you want an old named item to upgrade to 800 that has a perk you really want, like Keen? Pretty shit example, by the way, but you get the idea. Or do you want a crafted amulet that has a set perk? Or do you want a set bonus piece from Isle of the Night on your chest and helmet? Do you want a mutated amulet with a quad gem slot because you don't need a set bonus? Do you want to bring an artifact up from 725 that really completes your build? There's this freedom that they're giving us in diversity. There's going to be, this update, in my opinion, is going to make some of the most diverse builds in the game. Now, if you got a bit lost, I'm sorry. I'm kind of hyper explaining things the way I see them and the way I hear them. And I hope this can sort of form an idea. Maybe even the graphs are doing a better job explaining it than I am myself. And that was sort of the idea. I want to create some really neat graphs here. Now, jumping onto artifacts, there is a minor change I would like to make to the artifacts, a little error I made here, but it still gives a pretty much one-to-one concept of how I think the artifacts are going to like go in and work. So with artifacts, you're obviously going to be able to upgrade them to 800 with Umbrals from 700 and above. This goes for any 700 gear score gear and above, by the way, which adds a whole new layer of gear. For example, you have never been able to upgrade Frigid Dawn gear past 700. Or now, in Season 10, you will finally be able to upgrade Frigid Dawn gear, which is really, really fucking cool. So we actually have more ways to access old gear than we ever have before, meaning old content has never been more relevant than it will be in Season 10. So there's this idea that have brought a lot of value back to old content with Umbral. Umbral was the best system they ever had. I'm happy to see it back. Better than ever. Really cool about that. The hard cap on Umbral, that's going to be another question. But the actual system for Umbral in itself, besides the cap, fantastic. You can't complain about that. So again, taking the finisher from 725 to 800, what else is changing with artifacts? Preset perks are becoming charm slots. Now, there is a qualm with this, that in an error in my graphs. I believe these two perks are staying, but the perk that is changing is the one that you would customize at the Gypsum Kiln. The Gypsum Kiln is becoming obsolete. It is going to be effectively a redundant system that you'll pretty much solely use to, if you want to add a perk the old way, you still could probably. If you want to get a named item with materia, that's probably what's going to mainly be used for. Or, getting your weekly gold cash, whatnot. But in the sense, Gypsum Kilns are mainly going to become redundant. because the way you used to add perks to your artifacts would be at the Gypsum Kiln, but now that old perk you would be able to customize in an artifact is literally just going to become an offensive, or sorry, not necessarily an offensive, it's going to become a charm slot. Now, they said directly that the piece of gear, or rather the artifact, will determine what type of charm slot that will be which does leave me guessing a little bit, because, for example, with a Tune Leather Pants or Old Royal Crown or things like that, you could go with defensive or offensive. So is there going to be some sort of just basically it is what it is situation? I don't know. There's still going to be freedom, of course, but it might be a little bit more restricted in the sense that you might not be able to, like, for example, on a piece of armor, on artifact armor, how do we know it's going to be a weapon slot? Because you might want a weapon perk on your artifact, right? Is it going to be a skill charm slot? Don't necessarily know, right? Now, you could probably confidently say that a weapon's going to have offensive charm slot as the customizable perk, because that's pretty much all you can put on a weapon, right? But that's something we have to leave up to speculation, because we're not going to know that until release. But we just know that that customization perk is changing to a charm slot nonetheless. Now, I also quickly want to jump back up to charm slots themselves, if I didn't preface it already. This is going to be where crafting comes in. You might be thinking, oh wow, there's a lot of like farmed gear that's insanely strong in this update, and Umbral's coming back. How will crafting still be relevant? So besides still being able to possibly get best through the triple set or triple charm rolls, you will absolutely still be able to use a lot of crafting when it comes to perk charms. This is where crafting is also primarily probably going to have its use. Like Matrixes currently do, was the reference I think I made a few times. And I think that I hope this sort of goes over the way I think gearing is going to work the best I can. You know, I'm going to have this as a link in the description, this image, if you want to, you know, see a little bit closer, have it for yourself in high quality. This is, again, how I think gearing is going to work. Based on the reference image we got from Anyone from an actual in-game example, it's actually not far off, which is pretty neat. I like that I actually came somewhat close. The only difference being that in here, Anyone had an entirely new 4th perk slot. So you can actually have up to effectively 5 perks now if you include your gem. So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, really exciting. I think this gearing system is going to change the game entirely. War meta is probably going to be cooked for a solid, you know, month or two. And I think that's fun. We haven't had this unknown feeling, this sense where everyone is going to have to come together and figure things out and create new builds, and all this new stuff is going to be learning and figured out. We haven't had that feeling since 2021 launch. Because if you remember, every time in the past, when we've had these big updates, we have had the PTR. Elysian Wilds, we had the PTR. You know, we had a lot of dev videos for Aeternum. We had the Brimstone PTR, where everything was already pre-calculated and figured out, including me. I'm guilty of that. I was on the Season 3 PTR learning everything in and out for like a week. But now, it's just going to be everyone going in and figuring things out on live. And it's going to truly feel like launch again. I can't wait. There's going to be a lot of broken shit. There's going to be probably a fair amount of bugs too. Do not expect, or not expect that. But it's going to be exciting. The update is massive. The biggest update New World has ever had. Zone is bigger than Brimstone, more complex than Brimstone, more enemy types than Brimstone, more gear than ever added. Probably our largest gear score jump in terms of raw gear change, and more ways than ever to get gear, more content than ever in one update, including a new OPR map, Catacombs, a new raid, and a whole new zone and systems around it. I can't wait to see you guys in Season 10. I really enjoy making this video, theorizing how gearing would work. I hope it gave you some insight and some assurance into, you know, how things could look, might work, and especially the direct screenshot from Anyone helps a lot with that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.